Lucy, and as we come on the air back on our regular Tuesday 4 p.m. time slot on YouTube, Steelers Nation is being rocked by two late-breaking reports. First, $100 million. That's the defamation lawsuit being filed by that Lions fan that got into it with DK Metcalf, or vice versa. Metcalf got into it with him, but it's just not Metcalf facing money being taken from his pocket in this defamation suit. The Steelers are also named. We'll talk a little more about that, and I have some details from the Steelers Depot report, but also Mike McCarthy, the new Steelers head coach, in the midst of assembling a staff for 2026, has hit a snag, and it's with two up-and-coming offensive minds with the New Orleans Saints. They have decided to stay with the Saints rather than go to the Steelers. And I'm talking about Scott Tolzien, who was eyed for offensive coordinator and interviewed by Mike McCarthy for that position with the Steelers, and Chase Hazlitt, who was eyed for pass game coordinator. So we got to know why these guys are staying with the Saints rather than going with McCarthy and the Steelers. And for that, we're going to bring in Mr. Farabaugh, who's been following this, as now this offseason is in high gear. He's looking at free agency, the draft, the coaching search. So, Nick, what's going on? Give us the high-level view on how it's going and why this sort of seeming breakdown with these two highly touted offensive young guys with the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few ways to look at it. There's other qualified candidates the Steelers are looking at. I think of guys like Lunda Wells and Brian Angelichio, who they are interviewing today as candidates there. Listen, Tolzien and Hazlitt are up-and-comers that are probably going to be OC candidates, and not just this cycle. It's probably going to be something they're going to have in their back pocket multiple times here in the future. And when you're working with Tyler Shook, and you're working with that New Orleans Saints offense under Kellen Moore, sometimes these guys just feel like their career advancement isn't going to be helped by going to a place where there's no quarterback. They're not going to be calling plays, not that they would in New Orleans either, but it's a more familiar environment, and they have a young quarterback that they can work with and really show off. And I think that there's something there to that. Hazlitt in particular, I mean, we're talking about a 33-year-old that has had a meteoric rise. He got in the NFL in 2020. Tolzien, I think, got in the same year. Both these guys are fast-rising guys. Meanwhile, I think the Steelers under McCarthy right now, if you're a young up-and-comer who doesn't have to leave his position, there may not be the most attractive OC opening. But I do think Angelichio is a really good candidate, and I think he's probably going to end up getting this job from the Minnesota Vikings. He worked with Mike McCarthy back in Green Bay. And the interesting thing about him comes from the McVay branch with Kevin O'Connell. And so you get a McVay branch offensive coordinator, which I think is actually fascinating when you think about a lot of McCarthy's schematics and the way maybe that he could come in and really help modernize that scheme, particularly the run game scheme. So while they lose out on Tolzien and Hazlitt, who I think two very good coaches that the Steelers would have loved to have, would have been good hires, I also think you look at a guy like Angelichio and say, man, you get a voice from a different branch in here, from a different offense entirely from what they run with Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore's offense very similar in a lot of ways to Mike McCarthy's. He learned under him, so that's not surprising. But having that type of influence and then maybe bring in another coach or two from that side of things would really honestly give this staff a diversity offensively that they probably need. Right now, I think it's too much of the same. And what I mean by that is it's too much of the Mike McCarthy background. There's too much West Coast offense. There's too much of the old guard. I think there's some good assistants there. But I also think if you can get another voice, specifically run game focused from a different tree, that's how offenses evolve and make sure they're still modernizing. And that's part of, I think, why Angelichio is a very interesting hire.
No, that sounds great. And I love that McVay tree connection with him. I just think, when I was going on social media right before coming on, I just think it injures the Steelers fan psyche when you hear back to back two young guys who I think, when their names were floated, there was some excitement, even though I don't pretend to know the resumes of a lot of these assistants myself. So I don't know if that's why we come to you. What does it really mean? So when they decided to opt to stay with the Saints, you're thinking, whoa, what's going on? Is it the fact they don't want to work with Rodgers, who can be tough on coaches? Is it because McCarthy's going to be doing the play calling, or did the Steelers and McCarthy view Angeliquio as more of an option to bring new ideas, which I think should be very welcomed in Pittsburgh? So, I mean, like, where would you pinpoint the decision, in terms of this, change heading to Minnesota and Angeliquio?
Well, I think that's one of the least. He was one of the candidates they had on their initial board. I don't think that he's like an out of the left field candidate. We had heard this going back to last week that he potentially that he was going to be a candidate. Doran Dickerson, who was a tight end under him at Pitt, reported that. That's his college coach. Now everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, the Pitt connection's back, right?" You get the Pitt connection, the Pittsburgh connections, and Angeliquio has those. But this is not an out of left field hire if they make it. Was Tolzien, I think, the favorite and the guy that they probably wanted, sure. But I also think they really like what Angeliquio brings. He's a first-time OC. I think that's the interesting thing. He's 53, so he's not, Tolzien's like 38, I think. And so he's not as young as Tolzien, but he is a first-time OC, and he's been around, man, for like a very long time. When you look at his resume, I mean, it has bounced from McCarthy to Kevin O'Connell to Frank Reich to it's been all over the place. He worked as a tight ends coach when Kyle Shanahan was in Cleveland. Like, there's a lot of different influences really dotting his resume. And so he's a really fun kind of mash of different ideas in one coach, but he's also a first-time offensive coordinator if he gets it. And that, to me, is really interesting. The other thing that's interesting, and maybe something you don't see very often, is how often do you see tight ends coaches become OCs? It doesn't actually happen that often. Now, there are guys like Arthur Smith. He was a tight ends coach when he first became a position coach in the league. And then the Steelers have a history of doing this. I think of guys in the past that they've had. Mike Mularkey, for example, was a tight ends coach. It's not very often, though, that it happens nowadays. Usually it's the quarterback coach, right, that eventually gets elevated. Or sometimes they don't even do position coach. Sometimes they become pass game coordinator and immediately get elevated. Well, the Steelers, I think, are going to like this in some respect, and Mike McCarthy's going to like this because think about all the things the tight ends do. They protect. They're big in the run game. They're usually heavy with the motions. They're usually very much involved in protection schemes. So as a tight ends coach, you have to understand protection schemes, run game concepts, passing game concepts, obviously. So you have to understand the whole scope of the offense, probably more than maybe just about any other position outside of quarterback. And so that gives him a unique background to work like this, to be a tight ends coach in the league for over a decade at different stops, to understand how different ways of thinking are modernizing the game and can change his viewpoints. And I think that is a fairly fascinating idea in its own right. Even if he's not going to call plays, those OCs, the guys that are OCs to play callers, still do a lot of things throughout the week. They give their own suggestions. They watch a lot of tape. They usually put together the film or a presentation or something of that sort for what they think the game plan should be. They are the grinders of they're the kind of grunts. You know what I mean? That's what they are. And so they are important. And so Angeliquio coming in, he'll be able to get a little bit of his infusion. They're not going to run the whole offense like he does. McCarthy's going to have the big hand in that say, but still, you're going to feel his influence a little bit, and that alone could change up what they do and could change up a little bit of McCarthy's scheme from what it's been in the past.
I love that insight, Nick, and especially that sort of familiarity and experience with the tight ends. And as you know, we have one of the absolute unicorn tight ends in Darnell Mount Washington, who will be back and better than ever from that broken arm in 2026. So wait till this coach gets a load of him and the possibilities there. And like you said, he touches on these tight ends, touch on all the schemes, the blocking schemes, the running game, and the passing game. And he promises to be a unique weapon as he continues to develop. I just can't wait to see that unfold. The Darnell Washington story. To me, that I would love to see, the next chapter in that.
Yeah, I mean, Darnell and Fryermuth, I think, are the two that you really hope are able to pop from this. And the cool thing that's always been there in the Vikings offense is they've always featured their tight ends heavily. The tight end's always a big part of what they do. I think about TJ Hawkinson there. You can even get guys like Josh Oliver. It's certainly, Josh Oliver is maybe the most similar tight end that there is to Darnell. No one's quite like Darnell, but he's just a blocking hoss that is a force factor. And that to me is what you could bring with that. Darnell Washington, he might be better off slimming down a little bit to fit this scheme a little bit, just because it's so much spread. He's going to be probably split out more often than he is going to be in line. They're probably not going to run as much 12 personnel. It's going to be a lot of 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 running back. That is what the West Coast is. Now, will there still be some probably tailoring to the scheme? Sure, but Washington is a guy that can really be more dynamic than he is. He's up at 300, and I think it was like 10 pounds or something. I mean, his playing weight at Georgia, he's often said was down near like 280. Could you get down to? Do you want to shed 20 pounds, right, and get a little lighter and try and get some faster up the seams in a little bit? I know him being as huge as it is makes him the unicorn he is, but him being 280 would still make him quite a unicorn. There's not really tight ends playing at that weight. And Fryermuth is the winner of this because you look at some of the tight ends that Mike McCarthy has utilized or the Mike McCarthy offense has utilized, and you think about guys, Jake Ferguson, Dalton Schultz, and that's in recent years. They are moved tight ends that are able to win on option routes. They're able to win from the slot. They're able to win in line. They're able to do a lot of different things. And that is what makes those types of tight ends really valuable to a McCarthy system. And Fryermuth fits them to a T. I don't know if John Smith fits this scheme better than either of those two, to be quite honest with you. I'm kind of anticipating him being a cap casualty. But to me, Fryermuth and Washington fit this scheme well and can do a lot of different things. So I think that's very appealing to Mike McCarthy, and it should be to Angeliquio too, because imagine what you can do with the run game when you have a guy like Darnell Washington.
I like it, and boy, that would be, I think, a move in the right direction. A slimmer, faster, more agile Washington, because clearly that massive body size of his was a factor in that broken arm, because he was literally trying to stop his weight from going to the ground. I think when he broke that arm, it wasn't like another player broke it. I think he was trying to brace his fall when that thing cracked. So that was just another example of just how big this guy is. I mean, he cracked his own arm trying to support his weight going down to the ground. So yeah, maybe he needs to slim down and get back to that 280 sleek limousine size. So we'll see. Hey, the other thing that really interests me about the building out of this staff, and sort of the off season that we're going to have going forward in free agency and the draft, is we have 3 teams in the AFC North doing the same thing at the same time. And the hell with the Browns. I don't care about them. But the Ravens really interest me because it seems like they've gone the polar opposite of the Steelers and what they're doing. And I know you had some choice comments about what they're doing with their staff. I just want you to spend a couple minutes comparing and contrasting, and what message are they sending? What message are we sending? And how do you think it's going to play out with these 2 division rivalries locked on reloading themselves for 2026?
Well, I think what the Ravens are doing is they're chasing ceiling, and I don't think the Steelers are doing that. It's not really a byproduct of their staff; it's a byproduct of the coaching hires. I mean, you think about Jesse Minter, first-time head coach. We're talking about a guy that has modernized his scheme since coming to the NFL. But we're talking about Mike McCarthy. It's a floor-raising move. But the Steelers don't really need floor-raising, so it's like floor-maintaining. But it doesn't really heighten their ceiling. I think there's real questions on if Mike McCarthy can be a ceiling raiser in 2026. And you think about that because of the way things ended in those 12-5 seasons in Dallas. Very similarly to how Mike Tomlin seasons ended in Pittsburgh. With Minter, it's like opening the mystery box, right? And look at some of the staff hires he's made. I mean, you think about Declan Doyle, a 29-year-old offensive coordinator who will be a first-time play caller. He was the OC under Ben Johnson last year, but he didn't call plays, obviously. You think about Anthony Weaver, and then you think about some of the assistants they've hired. Guys like Dwayne Ledford, who is a very well-respected offensive line coach. Eddie Faulkner now joining that coaching staff. You've seen it firsthand how good the Steelers running backs have been under Eddie Faulkner the past 7 years. Think about guys like James Conner, Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, Kenneth Gainwell. All of those guys have come through. And so what it really opens up to is, man, the Steelers are playing it safe. And that's, to a degree, what they want to do. It's fine. But the Ravens are chasing ceiling, man. The Ravens have Lamar Jackson. They have Super Bowl aspirations. John Harbaugh wasn't getting in there, and so they shot for the moon. It's very possible that this crashes and burns. You know, everyone's going to praise the Ravens because the Ravens are making the flashy moves, and they're making moves that look really, really good on paper. But it's also the process of, hey, you're a team stuck in purgatory. You don't have anywhere to go other than maintaining the same quote. So you fired the coach that's been there for 18 years. You hire a first-time head coach. You bring in all these names that are top names of the cycle. You lure a coach out of Ben Johnson's scheme. That is big, I think, for Lamar Jackson. And you chase ceiling. Again, all those things I mentioned, it's the unknown box. It could absolutely crash and burn, and the Ravens could suck this year. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But also at some point, the Ravens looked at it and said, you know what? It's time to try and chase that Super Bowl. What we're doing right now isn't getting us over the hump. And so we'll see if it gets in there. It's different thought processes kind of acting at play there.
I like it, Nick. I would love to see nothing more than a train wreck down in the charm city of Baltimore with all of these hot shots vying for their next coaching job and using the Ravens as their stepping stone. You know, if all of these guys are styling and profiling and it turns into a resume beauty contest with these guys looking to get out of town as fast as possible, I would love nothing more than that. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on both of these and how it pans out. I got to go just to give, I teased it at the open, so I got to give the audience just a little more meat on the bone. We knew the other shoe was going to drop sooner or later up in Detroit over that regular season incident along the Steelers sideline when DK Metcalf got into it with a blue-haired fan, Ryan Kennedy, on the sideline. There was a lot of accusations on what Kennedy did to elicit DK's ire, and that there was a confirmed prior incident with those same two guys back when DK was a Seahawk. Kennedy only claimed that he just used DK's given name, DeKalen. There were accusations that stronger language was used, racial language. Accusations really never really confirmed by any videotape that was out there, and there was a lot of videotape. So now this Ryan Kennedy obviously lawyered up, and he's coming with both guns blazing, $100 million defamation suit, and it's not just Metcalf, it's the Steelers. It's Chad Ochocinco, I guess, who was on a podcast when some of these accusations came out. He's going after Ford Field management as well. So I have to think that this gets settled out of court, because certainly this would be must-see court TV if it ever went to trial and there are cameras in the room, and we get the back and forth with all of these marquee NFL names. But just something to keep an eye on as a fan, and certainly as a reporter yourself, it'll be interesting to see where it leads and who cashes in at the end of this thing, because we know, the NFL is nothing if not a cash register. So he's seeing dollar signs. And any thoughts, Nick, on how you think this plays out?
I mean, probably out of court makes sense. I mean, he's suing a significant amount of parties here. As you mentioned, he's suing Metcalf. He's suing the Steelers, I think,
Yeah.
which is going to be an interesting one. I don't know how the Steelers are going to be implicated in that. That might be a little flimsy. He's suing, as you mentioned, Chad Johnson. Ocho Cinco was the first one to kind of put the rumors out there, so that makes sense. So he's then suing, the parent company of the Club Shay Shay podcast that he does with Shannon Sharp. He's suing Shay Shay Media LLC, which is Shannon Sharp's media company, and is suing the Ford Field Management, which I think is kind of another interesting wrinkle to all of that, given what the management and has kind of said and has done about that. So all of that comes together to kind of create something that probably won't go away for a while. I mean, I think the conference hearing is not until May, so we probably won't hear much about this for the next 3 months until then. And then if it even reaches that, you might hear about a settlement at some point. That's my guess is what ends up happening. But if this does end up dragging through a public mud, this is going to be pretty messy, I would imagine. So we'll see. But, I mean, we talk about May 5th, I think. I mean, by that point, DK is going to be probably around, for OTAs and minicamp. So we'll see what happens there. And it'll definitely be one of the situations to watch. And it's going to continue to linger, I think, until either a settlement is reached or until something happens in court with the definitive rule.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on that. And last week when we talked to you, you were down in Mobile, Alabama, with an eye on the 2026 draft prospects, some agents down there, a lot of coaches, Andy Weidel with the Steelers. We'll get your take on that. And, you mentioned, I saw on social media, there was maybe some interest shown in a quarterback by the Steelers, and, tell us who else they might have had their eye on when they were down there. But also, there was that late opening for a GM in Minnesota. The Vikings fired their GM. Is there we thought we dodged a bullet and Andy was coming back for 2026 with the Steelers. Is there any chance that surprise opening with the Vikings, they try to tempt Andy up there?
I'm not expecting that to happen. Yeah, the whole thing about the Senior Bowl is it's like a big congregation. So you get coaching hires, you get interviews set up, you get a lot of different things kind of working as a force there. It's almost like the mini combine, because the combine is really kind of the first of just an insane conference between media, scouts, agents, all of the sorts, right? That's what that is. The Senior Bowl is like a mini version of that. And so there's always whispers going around. The quarterback I was talking about, Ty Simpson, he wasn't even there. I mean, he was there. He was in the stands. Could not participate in the Senior Bowl due to some injuries, which is one of the issues with Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson had a cracked rib in the last playoff game. He had a back issue and reportedly a leg issue, just really racked up in his first season as a starter, but he came out anyways. And in what is a very weak class, he will be the second quarterback off the board almost assuredly. Whether that's the first round or the second, I think is a question. And there's concerns about Ty Simpson, but the Steelers do like him. And so there's so much that's flying around at the Senior Bowl. It's all early indications. Like, for example, a lot of the buzz was around, Steelers coaching staff, stuff like Patrick Graham. He got hired while the Steelers were down there. But we kind of knew that was coming. So, I got to hear a lot about the McCarthy hire, a lot about Patrick Graham, who very highly thought of, the new Steelers defensive coordinator. People really like what he brings to the table. And so you got to learn a bit about the Steelers coaches and some of the visions McCarthy had while in Dallas or Green Bay. A lot of really good things there. I always like going down there. It's just because you learn such little things and different things about the guys you cover and different things about the league that you can utilize. And that's why Mobile is always really important as a resource.
Any sense, maybe not the player, but what position the Steelers would be looking in the first round, which will unveil live in the Steel City?
My guess is, well, I think Simpson will be a consideration, so it's possible they take him, big quarterback. Um, but I also think it's totally possible Simpson experiences a draft fall. I don't think the league's totally bought and sold on Ty Simpson. But you look at the wide receiver position, and that's the one that sticks out to me. I heard the Steelers connected to a lot of wide receivers, that they are heavily exploring that position in particular. And I'm not so sure that's necessarily going to be the second tier of receivers. Now, I think the top tier being Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, and Jordan Tyson are going to be gone. But could the Steelers move up for one of them? That'll be the question. They have 12 draft picks, so they have a lot of draft picks, 5 in the top 100 more than likely, with the comp pick they're going to get for Dan Moore Jr. leaving. If that happens, the Steelers are going to have enough to go up a few spots if they so wish. And you remember people maybe don't remember this, but the first year that Mike McCarthy was there was 2020. Who did they take? CeeDee Lamb. Granted, they stood at 12 and took him. But the Steelers could go up and get one of those guys. They need a route winner. They need a guy that can run all the routes in the book. That's not really DK Metcalf. He's better on a limited vertical route tree. They need a guy that's just kind of a winner that wins from different alignments all over the place. Tyson, Lemon, Tate, all of those guys fit that. Now, they could draft a guy like Denzel Boston or Casey Concepcion, too. Concepcion, I think my best comparison for him would be Zay Flowers, who is with the Baltimore Ravens. There's a lot of fun wide receivers in this class, though. It's a great wide receiver class, and I think they're going to double dip in this class. I think they're going to try and fix it once and for all. I think they're probably going to fix part of it in free agency. That's my guess. But I could totally see them going up and getting a guy like Tyson. I think he's the one to watch because Jordan Tyson has some injury questions. He has some repeated lower leg injuries. That has been a concern for teams in talking through the process. He was once thought of as a top 10 pick. He's probably not going to get there anymore. He might fall to like 15 or 16. So he was pick at 21. That's not a crazy leap up. If they have to go up 5 or 6 spots to go get him, he is the type of route winner. And we know the Steelers under Omar Khan and Eddie Weidl have really been willing to take risks on guys with medical questions, right? I can think of Harmon had them last year. The year before that, I can think of Troy Fautanu had them. Darnell Washington had them. They took Corey Trice. Now, granted, they didn't take Washington in the first round, but they did take Harmon and Fautanu in the first round. And I believe Harmon had a shoulder. I think it was a shoulder injury that the people were worried about. Granted, he came up with 2 knee injuries that was unrelated, but Fautanu's knee was the worry. He did miss a year with that injury, but the Steelers have shown an ability and a willingness to go up and get these guys with medical questions. So I think that's one to watch. I think wide receiver, if I had to guess right now, would be my guess. The only question is if they would move up, because it depends on how far those guys would fall, or if they would stay and take one of those guys I mentioned in Boston, Concepcion.
Do you think we're in the market for a replacement for Broderick Jones? Has that played itself out, or given the ups and downs of last season?
I think they'll stick with Broderick Jones or Dylan Cook. That's my guess. I think those guys will compete for the starting left tackle spot. Guard could be one. I think that's one to watch. Guard is a very interesting position for the Steelers this year. They have Spencer Anderson, so they have a young guy they could put in there, but I think he's viewed more internally as kind of a 6th lineman that can play everywhere rather than a true starting left guard in the league. Could they bring back Isaac Seumalo for one more year? I think they could. That's something on the table, but they could also look at the rest of the free agency market or draft a guard. It's not a great guard class, but there's enough at the top to where guard could be a first-round consideration. I don't feel like tackle is. Unless there's just a guy that just falls that's just too good to pass up. I don't think tackle is going to be a consideration in round 1 because I think they feel like between Cook and Jones, they'll be okay there. But I think left guard, that'll be one to watch.
All right. Kind of a sad note I saw just looking down some of the reports. Our guy from Harrisburg, Dante Kent, apparently tore his ACL during a attempted December return. I guess that news is just kind of filtering out. He was a guy you and I profiled here in Harrisburg since he's a local product, and he really was a nice guy to talk to, and never really got out of the gate. nagging injuries. What do we know about what could be in store for him this coming year? Is there any chance
Yeah.
he gets on the field, or has a better outcome?
I mean, I think the issue is it's pretty hard to get back on the field and totally ready when you tear your ACL in December. That's just really hard. And when you really utilize that, um, and you have, it depends on the type of surgery you have to get. But when you get hurt that late in the year, man, it's an uphill battle to be ready for the next year. Like, it just is. Could he? Sure. Um, but like, how good is he going to be by training camp? He's probably going to be, if I had to bet, he'll start on the pup list, and probably have to work back from there. So that to me says uphill climb for the roster. It's just not going to be easy for him to make it, John. With that in regard, if you injure your knee or Achilles or whatever this late in the year, man, if you're trying to make a roster push, that's hard. It's so we'll see where he can go if he can be ahead of time. But I mean, he's probably not even fully into rehab yet. And we're in February. And remember, the spring workout schedule is only 3 months away. It's closer than we probably think it is. It's not that far. And ACLs nowadays are 6 to 9 on the optimistic view. Sometimes they take 12 or longer. It depends. Did he just tear his ACL? Or did he also have other associated damage? Like, there's a lot of questions there with Dante Kent in that regard. But if it's clean ACL tear, he's still got an uphill battle. So we'll see where things can go. If he can be back out there in July, he's got a shot.
Okay. Yeah, the Steelers, as duly noted in the comments, have not had much luck with their late round cornerback picks. And so how do they address that secondary in free agency and or this draft coming up?
Secondary wise, I'm not sure they're going to address it all that much. I think there's a feeling in that room that they have some pieces. Now, by addressing it, could they bring back James Pierre? Certainly. I think that's on the table. I think safety is going to be the one spot to look at. I think they're going to look at safety and try and bring in a young guy there. They've needed a young guy at safety for a long time. It's Deshaun Elliott coming back from a knee injury, and Jalen Ramsey. And I don't know what Jalen Ramsey's future is going to be. Is he back next year? I think that's a little murky. If he's not back there next year, I think that changes a lot of the things the Steelers look at. They probably need to add another corner just because, even if they bring back Pierre, they probably need to add another corner just because of how much dime and nickel that Patrick Graham's defense uses. But they really need a safety, and that could be a big safety or whatever. But this is a really good safety draft class. It's a very good class of safeties. And I think that is going to be one of their early picks. I'd bet good money, John, on them making a pick at safety with one of those 5 picks in the top 100 that they're probably going to have. And there's a really good group of them. There's a lot of good ones at the Senior Bowl, guys like Bud Clark and Skylar Thomas and Michael Taff. There was a guy at the Shrine Bowl, Cole Wisniewski, who I think is rising up boards too. There's just a lot of players at that position that fit into that day 2 range that are going to be really good players. So I expect safety to be a part of their consideration and really addressing the secondary this year, getting younger in the secondary in that regard, and adding someone young that can fill in for the future.
Interesting. Yeah. Again, definitely sorry to hear about Dante Kent. We wish him a speedy recovery. I guess we'll close out the show because I just want to get your perspective on how far and how fast the legend of Will Howard has grown in this offseason. And, with some offhand comments by McCarthy, and, we know he's been touted by Gruden, and I guess Big Ben made some nice comments on him. Bruce Arians made some nice comments on Will Howard. Steelers Nation seems to think, it's a lot of think it's, time to give him a real look and a real shot, but he is a 6th round pick. And as somebody pointed out on social media, Purdy only got in because of injuries. Even Tom Brady only got his shot after injuries. They were never the plan. A quarterback drafted that late was never really the plan going into a season. How far over our skis have we gotten with Will Howard and the legitimacy of his prospects as a starter, as a 6th round pick?
Yeah, I mean, I like we've talked about this multiple times. I really like Will Howard, but this idea that a 6th-round pick is the future of the franchise, let's calm it down a little bit. I think there's a lot of positives to actually work with Will Howard. He should have been drafted earlier in the 6th round, but I also think, hey, like it's going to take some things for this guy to get on the field. As you mentioned, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott had Tony Romo get hurt. Like there are things that have to happen for it. 6th-round picks just aren't owed playing time. They have to earn it. And generally they have to have things work their way to get on the field. And it's probably going to be the same way with Howard. Especially, if they believed Will Howard was 100% the slam dunk guy, I don't think we would be talking about Aaron Rodgers coming back for another year, right? And that's just something that to think about. Now, I think with Howard, there are a few things that stand out that really I think are promising for him. One, he's very smart above the neck. The pre-snap stuff is great. I think he's able to take on a lot, and you have to be able to take on a lot in McCarthy's system if you're going to want to do that, because quarterbacks have incredible pre-snap freedom to do what they wish. I think that's good for Will Howard. I think he's got great accuracy. I think he's got great touch on the football. And so there are things there that work well. He's mobile enough. He could throw off platform at times. Now, the things that worry me about Will Howard, how does he deal with pressure? I think that's the question. It's not that he struggled with it as much in college. It's just that he didn't face much of it, so we don't know what it looks like. So I think that's a big question, particularly, sometimes when you watch on film, at Ohio State, he would drop his eyes against pressure. The post-snap processing, I think, is a little bit at times. He misses the read. And then the footwork. If the footwork's on point and he's on time, that's when he plays comfortable in a zone. When it's not, it looks bad. That's when he's a beat late. And doesn't have some cannon arm. He has a good arm, but it's not a cannon. It's not Josh Allen, right? And so when he throws it a beat late, those balls hang a little bit too long, and that can lead to turnover-worthy plays. So I very much want to see Will Howard in a live game. I certainly wish that we had seen him last year in the preseason. I think that was unfortunate that he broke his hand. But calm down a little bit on the franchise quarterback talk for him right now. But we'll see where he goes. He certainly is the young guy where if things just go awful, they're 4-9 or whatever, things are just terrible, and they have this veteran quarterback where you do nothing by playing him. I'm totally fine with seeing Will Howard play a little bit. He does have promise. I'm not sure if the upside I see is, like top 5 unbelievable quarterback if he reaches the ceiling. There could be something there, though, and I thought he was much better than the 6th-round pick. I would have taken him at least, I thought in the 4th round he would have been a good pick. I thought it was a little crazy he fell as far as he did.
All right. We have a Howard in the rough, and we'll see how he develops in this offseason, which is just starting. There's going to be lots of questions. We're going to have all the answers here every Tuesday at 4 with Nick. And as we look ahead to Super Bowl Sunday, we'll be watching 2 long shot teams. When this 2025 season started, the odds of Seattle and New England squaring off in the Super Bowl were as long as you get. So it's showing that there are one-season turnarounds, and this offseason is going to be big in so many ways for the Steelers, and we'll cover it all here on The Breakdown. So be with us next Tuesday afternoon, and until then,